Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tf1 show. I am so excited to welcome not one, but two guests on the podcast today. So I have Will from Formula Podcast 1 and Dornie from F1Dornie. Welcome, guys.
Good to be here.
Hello.
Yeah, so, they don't really need any more introduction. I'm obviously going to link their channels in the description of this podcast. Below there in the little description box, so please go and subscribe to their channels. Both of them are brilliant in their own way. They have varied content, different types of things that you can go and look at. So please go and do that. And yeah, so happy to have you guys on again. I think both of you have been on the podcast before. So, I know it's going to be a really good chat. Okay, so the Portuguese Grand Prix, let's get into it as soon as possible, given that we're probably going to be chatting for quite a while. What did we think, Dornie? Let me start with you.
Yeah, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting that start. That start was something
chaotic.
else.
That's all I'm saying, chaotic.
Yeah, I think if you looked at the results at the end of the race, you would have thought it would have just been another standard race. But there was actually so much that was happening and a lot of silly moves from people and a lot of chaos.
100%. Well, your 2 cents?
Yeah, I thought it was a pleasant surprise, really, because we all kind of came into it. We thought, is there going to be overtaking? I don't know. There might be, there might not be. There's one DRS zone. But, despite there not being a large array of incidents, I think the majority of people that watch Formula 1 end up going back and say, there was no crashes, it was a boring race. I think it could be one of the more underrated ones when we get to the end of the season, because there was so much racing, so much wheel-to-wheel racing as well. And, like Dornie mentioned, the start, I thought we were in for another Monza. Maybe not quite another Monza, but yeah, it was brilliant.
I have to say, I'm going to just cut in here with you talking about the wheel-to-wheel racing. How amazing was that Perez-Ocon battle?
Amazing.
That was I thought that was the best thing I've watched this year so far in terms of actual racing. And we know they have a bit of history, from Racing Point days. So that was really, really awesome to watch. But anyways, as the way we usually do things here on the podcast, what we'll do is we'll discuss all of the teams from front to back, obviously maybe pay a bit more attention to specific drivers or specific teams where necessary, where we think it's interesting to talk about for a bit longer. So let's start with Mercedes. Let's start with Lewis Hamilton. He's obviously now broken Michael Schumacher's wins record at 92 wins, which in itself is quite an incredible achievement. But I also think the way he did it was really impressive. I think he properly smashed Bottas today, out of the park.
Yeah, I think, if we look at the start of the weekend, Bottas was fastest in all 3 practice sessions, fastest in Q1, fastest in Q2. Q3 comes around, and then Hamilton kind of turns the gear up. And wow, the way he did it as well, by 0.2 of a second, which is pretty big for the look at the margins that we've had between Hamilton and Bottas in qualifying this year. That's one of the bigger ones. And then, winning the race by 25 seconds, even though he supposedly has cramp. I'm still convinced that's partly mind games. It says, I had to back off at the end. Yeah, it still wins, but no, okay, rubbish. But no, still, I think it really was something else, and absolutely dominant, completely dominant. From basically lap 8 onwards, there was no stopping him.
And Dornie, what do you think about the fact that he was actually sort of running behind Bottas initially and then was able to basically close back up, overtake him and drive off into the distance?
It's it was a bad start in terms of Lewis starts. So I was kind of thinking, what's going to happen here? This is looking spicy. Valtteri's maybe going to get his act together. But it didn't quite happen. I don't know if Valtteri pushed a little bit too much, but then even on, Valtteri struggled so much to warm up those new tyres that he got put on, and Lewis just had no problems at all. He was complaining that his tyres had gone, and then they got through the graining and they were fine. He was like, no, I'm fine to keep going on these tyres, don't you worry. But yeah, dominant, just... I ran out of words.
No, it was a scary, scary good performance for me. There at the end, at one stage, he was just literally every lap was the fastest lap. He was just the pace that he was running at was so much faster than everybody else, and he was still able to keep his tires going. And then, near the end, I actually commented, I can't remember if it was on Twitter or WhatsApp, but he was like lapping more than a second a lap faster than Valtteri, like over those last 10 laps of the race, where I was just thinking like, this can't be possible. Is this Max Verstappen and Alex Albon that we're looking at? Because like we didn't expect there to be that big of a difference, and yet, I mean, we had it. And what I want to ask you guys next is, I mean, we've spoken so much about Bottas over the whole season, about his struggles, about where he can improve, where he maybe, falls short compared to Lewis. But with the rumors now coming out this week of George Russell potentially being in jeopardy when it comes to his seat at Williams, if you had to, let's say, revisit the decision of keeping Bottas in that seat for next year, what would you do? Would you reconsider leaving him for another year?
Well, I think contracts have been, they're just pieces of paper. I mean, Dornie, you're the law expert here, but yeah, exit clauses have been pulled left, right, and centre. We've seen Perez put out a Racing Point. Now it's looking at George as the one that could be out of Williams. And
I mean, that's a lovely
could Q2 performance too. Have I frozen?
Yeah.
You have.
Okay, am I back? Am I back?
You are
okay.
back. You are back. And we've lost him again.
I'll start again. So, yeah, contracts, they're out the window. But with Russell getting into Q2 for the 7th time this season, how can you let that option go? I mean, we've seen it with Verline, we've seen it with Ocon in the past as well. But this one, I feel like this is an opportunity you can't pass up at Mercedes, especially with Hamilton, who I think even said this weekend that he's not going to be racing for much longer. You've got to be looking to the future now if you're Mercedes. And Bottas, let's be frank, is not the future, because as Red Bull, as some of these other teams catch up, that massive gap that Mercedes have now is not going to be there forever. And we do need to be looking at who the future of that team is. I don't think Bottas is consistent enough to really keep that Mercedes at the front.
Dornie, Queen of Contracts, what do you think?
Queen of Contracts. Contracts don't mean anything. Yeah, I think the current silly season has been one of the silliest, and it's dragged out for so long. And yes, it's kind of, the season's a lot later this year. F2's been pushed back. There's so many reasons for it to be a little bit later. But Valtteri seemed to get signed in the middle of nowhere. Like, no one else got signed around him. It just kind of came out of the blue. I don't know if that was a really good tactic from Valtteri, going, okay, yep, let's get me signed up. Like, let's get another contract here. Because it does seem to be a bit of a mess, doesn't it? I don't know how much I believe the Perez rumour is. Because it would be really, really shady, especially considering Williams have just re-signed, or so. I don't know. Hopefully,
yeah.
I'm not true.
It's a weird one. Like, I am of the opinion that they should have signed Russell already for next year. I think they should have played the long game. I think they had Russell in the team. And to be honest, if Hamilton ended up leaving early, they could always bring Bottas back. Or, I mean, probably they could pick whoever they wanted to put in that Mercedes. I think really it wouldn't have been difficult for Mercedes to just pull up anyone, any old driver, and to partner Russell in that seat. So it's a weird one for me. I think this is a pretty bad weekend for Bottas. I don't know if it's going to go better in Imola next week. Somehow he looks like a bit of a broken man. He didn't sound like he really knew what was going on in the race at the end. He said he doesn't know why it was so much slower. He doesn't have any answers. And when you get to that point as a driver, that's probably when you need to start getting worried, and Mercedes need to start getting worried as well. Because, I mean, Bottas was, 8 seconds up the road from Max? And that's only because Max had that issue where the soft tires didn't work for the first stint. I think if they had the same strategy as Mercedes, Max probably would have beaten Valtteri as well. So it's a tough one.
you could see when Valtteri was on the podium, he wasn't celebrating. He was just there, but he wasn't actually with it. I don't know if he was reflecting on the race in that moment. I don't know if celebrating Hamilton's successes are too much for him now, considering Hamilton is breaking records like 92. Bono was there, but even Max was going over and celebrating with Lewis, and Valtteri just seemed to be there. He was standing there. He was having a drink of the champagne. And then he was like, oh, I need to go and spray this now.
I mean, imagine being he was 25 seconds, almost 26 seconds down the road. That's a pit stop. Lewis could have done a 2-stop and still beaten Bottas, which to me is a bit crazy. But at the end of the day, that's where we are now with Mercedes. And I would like to now move on to another team that has definitely a well-performing driver and a not-so-well-performing driver at the moment. And I just want to put a disclaimer up and say this is going to be a very, very difficult conversation for me to have. I'm going through deep, dark waters. And I think all of you that listen to this show often know that we're going to be talking about Red Bull now and what's happening with Alex Albon. Because, and let's start with Alex, because the Red Bull driver's seat is the talk of the town over the last couple of weeks. He really, really, really needed a good race this weekend, I think. Really needed a good race. And what did we get? Well, did we get a good race from Alex?
I thought we got a brilliant race. I don't know what I think. Albon pulled everything out the bag. He wasn't. He was. Albon, every weekend, I'm like, okay, he's had a bad weekend, but there's no way it can get any worse. There's literally no way it can get any worse. But he was beaten by Kimi Räikkönen in an Alfa Romeo.
And he couldn't get past
Sebastian Vettel in
an Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, exactly. It was shocking. And there was a point where he was only 4 seconds ahead of George Russell and was one track extend away from getting a 5-second penalty. And I was just sat there thinking, if the Williams gets ahead of him, Albon's already lost out to Russell in qualifying, I think, back in Hungary. If he does it in a race...
Yeah, it doesn't bear talking about, does it, Will?
Marco saying, oh, for goodness sake, if I can't again. What I say, with all these rumours going out on the build-up of this weekend, that he could be, he's got till Imola basically before he gets booted out. It's not looking good, and Imola, he's going to get limited preparation time as well.
New track
didn't really work brilliantly at the Eiffel Grand Prix, did it? So I do worry for Albon. I think we could be entering his last race with Red Bull next weekend.
Yeah,
Dornie, your thoughts?
It's not good. I think the one positive that we can take from today is at the press conference after, Christian did seem to be quite supportive, but I don't know if that's just because they know the second seat is cursed because no one can drive a car like Max drives a car. But still, I don't know if we're getting... I don't remember hearing much radio from Alex this weekend, but I know last weekend he seemed to kind of just be moaning rather than fighting. Or not last weekend, but last race. And I don't know if relying on the fact that the car is terrible for his driving style is enough, because if we're looking at Hulk or if we're looking at Perez, you'll know better than me, but I would say one of them is going to be closer to Max's driving style, which is already going to solve 20-30% of the problem. So yeah, it's just not good. And literally everyone in the paddock, and I'm sure it genuinely is everyone in the paddock, wants him to do well, and it's not.
Yeah. So let's really talk about, Dornie. You referenced the interview that they did with Horner at the end of the race, and there was a couple of interesting things there that he mentioned, where firstly, Christian Horner believes that he doesn't think Pierre would do a better job in the car compared to Alex. And he said, well, they have ample data on both of those drivers, and they understand how both of them drive the car. And he basically made us believe that, yes, Pierre's doing well now because the AlphaTauri is an easy car to drive, fast, and the Red Bull isn't. And basically, they're both in the same boat, which to me would justify why Red Bull has been so patient with Alex, where they've literally just been I couldn't believe how forthcoming Christian was after the race, even now, to Alex. Like, he was upfront about the fact that the race didn't go well, but he was still saying that it's, they want Alex to do well. They want Alex to succeed. They know that the car is really difficult for him to drive at the moment, and he's not getting, everything he is supposed to be getting out of the car, and they want to help him. Like, I find it very interesting. I did expect sort of a harder stance from Christian about Alex after the race. So what does that mean? You guys maybe think that, yes, we've seen rumors that he has till Imola to impress them. Do you think they will give him another couple of races? But do you think another couple of races is going to make a difference? In my mind, if he's not improving at this point, like in 2 races time, I don't really think we're going to see enough of an improvement to justify keeping him, unfortunately.
Honestly, I think Red Bull at this point, and in fact, since we were discussing this just before we went on live, they're playing the waiting game. They, unlike last year when they had Pierre in the car, they weren't fighting for second place in the constructors. They had Ferrari.
Yep. I mean, after Ferrari, again, lost for words.
Tauri of second place. Every time I speak, it does this. Ferrari aren't there anymore, basically. And Red Bull, they've got that second place in the bag. They don't need to think about someone backing up Max at the moment because they're not fighting any of the championships. So what they can afford to do then is to almost minimize the damage. And then when they drop Pierre, everyone kind of thought, this is a bit harsh, come on, guys. And they got a bit of stick for it. I think they're waiting for the public to agree that, Albon, your time's up, off you go. And they can afford to do that now. And it's why I think, after Imola, Albon will be gone. That will be it. Because at that point, Red Bull can look towards next year and think, right, okay, let's try someone else out. Maybe Hulkenberg, maybe Perez, whoever is available, whoever's out of contract, give them a go in the car, because Albon, it's not working, and I guess it is worth them experimenting now and seeing maybe who could get closer to Max.
Okay, so let me ask you before we move on to the next team. Will and Dornie, if you had to choose between Perez and Hulkenberg to put in that car, who would you choose?
I know who Dornie's picking.
I also know who Dornie's picking.
I don't think you do. As much as I would love it to be Hulk, I would pick Perez.
Ooh, interesting.
Okay.
Plot twist.
And I don't know if it's just because I can't bear to see Hulk in a car that can actually probably give him a podium and still not get it. But I think Perez...
I think if Hulk gets a podium, they've got to do... You know what they did with Lewis Hamilton today, where they went through all of his race wins? They've got to do a similar thing for Hulk. Every single one of his races up until he gets the podium.
It'd be a 10-minute video.
There, but...
I think Perez is the better option. He's going to bring them money, which right now is all anyone seems to care about. He's new, recent, proven podium sitter. I do think Perez is slightly a better option.
So I think very, very fair point. I agree. Will, do you agree?
No, I don't actually. I think, okay, yes, Red Bull are losing that Aston Martin backing. Part of me feels, looking at what Hulkenberg has done this year, given we know that Perez is consistent, fair enough, but let's just take Hulk's race performances this year, where he has stepped in the car with very little experience beforehand and very quickly adapted to that car. Okay, no matter what car that is. He did it in Silverstone with the Racing Point then, and they did it in Eiffel Grand Prix, which was a very different Racing Point because it had all these new upgrades on it. That's really what Red Bull want right now. They want someone who can adapt to a car no matter what it is.
Poor Will.
Yeah, very much. Oh no, right. don't know where I got up to there, but that's what Red Bull want. They want a car that is tuned to Max Verstappen. So if they can get someone like Hulkenberg who can tune into that car as well, then I think really he's that perfect fit for the team.
I think it's a really tough choice. I think you've both convinced me one way or the other. I think, to be honest, Red Bull is spoiled for choice. If we're quite honest about it, like they have so many options. I mean, sounds like they even have Esteban Ocon. Imagine that. Max Verstappen, Esteban Ocon at Red Bull. Imagine this. Imagine the driver briefings. Like I would like to just sit in Max and Ocon arguing about car setup. Like I think it would be very. They might even have
George. They could get George.
They could, and then
get Mercedes engines in that Red Bull. Get Mercedes engines in the Red Bull.
I don't want to talk about the Mercedes Red Bull engine situation. Like it's not going to happen. I'm going to look into the camera and I'm going to tell the ladies and gentlemen of the Formula One world, Red Bull isn't getting Mercedes engines because it makes no sense, and that's the last I'm going to say about it. Let's move on to another thing that does not make sense, and that is Scuderia Ferrari. Now, let's talk about Charles Leclerc, because he had a very good weekend again. Like he's been really on top of his game, I think, ever since Monza, really, where he had that big accident. Ever since then, it's been actually going pretty well for him. Sometimes because of the car, sometimes despite the car. What do we think of Ferrari's weekend overall?
Charles, for me, is up there with Daniel Ricciardo and Pierre Gasly for being being three of the drivers of the season in my book. I think they have really, really impressed, and
it's lost for words. That's how impressed he is.
Yeah, we've seen. I cannot deal with these.
We're getting really good entertainment.
Every time I talk, it decides to cut me out. No, where was I? Right, Charles Leclerc. We've seen through Sebastian how poor that Ferrari is, and yet he's got 2 podiums with it, and came close to another one today. Like, fair play to him. He's absolutely smashing it.
No, he's showing really well.
Definitely, he is really, really driving that car. I think a lot of the teams at the minute have one driver who is outperforming the car, absolutely smashing it, and a second driver who is not. And for Ferrari, it's definitely Charles that is outperforming that car and really pushing it to its limits and getting big steps in there. Big steps.
Well, Mattia Binotto basically called Seb the second driver just now after the race, which is a controversial one if you're a 4-time world champion to be called a second driver. I think that's not really what you want to hear. But to be fair, it's been all aboard the struggle bus for Seb this year. And yes, I know obviously his driving style doesn't suit the car. Like, that's clear as day to see. I think we all know that there isn't all of a sudden a 5/6 gap between Seb and Charles every race. Like, it's just not there. Last year, that gap wasn't there. So it's not as if Seb all of a sudden just lost his way. It's just he can't seem to drive the car in the way that Charles can, which is the same problem that Alex Albon seems to have with Max. And to an extent, I'm trying to think of another example because in my head there is another example, but now I can't think of it.
Daniel as well.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a very good point, Dornie. And it breaks my heart to see. And that raises an interesting question that I was thinking about, with the whole Max Alex situation. But I think it's also appropriate thinking about, what's happening at Ferrari is, do you think it makes sense for a team to focus, I guess, the development or setup of their car around one driver's preferences if the other driver is so badly affected by that decision? Because in my head, if I was Red Bull Racing, and I'm going to use them as an example, let's say you tell Max, listen, Max, I know you want a really, really, sharp front end. You want that quick turn in. You'll sort out the oversteer mid-corner, whatever. We know that's what you prefer. But Alex does not like that. From a team championship perspective, do you think it makes sense for Red Bull to be like, okay, Max, we're going to have to compromise. we'll meet you halfway with what you want, but we can't go all the way to what would, for you, ideally be the fastest solution, because Alex actually is 0.2 or 1.5 faster using this configuration relative to you. I want to put that open. I'll throw that open to you guys. What do you think of a team playing sort of a strategic game like that? Do you think that's something that's feasible, firstly? And secondly, do you think it makes more sense for them rather to back their boy and say, you know what, whoever's in the second car needs to sort out themselves?
I personally don't think it makes sense. It's quite it's basically just saying, do I want a driver's title, or do I want to get a driver's title and the team title? I think the only kind of scenario where it might make sense is when you had the like Kimi and Seb relationship. Kimi was more than happy to be that second driver and help Seb out as much as possible to get Seb kind of his goal, but Alex Albon isn't happy to help Max get his goal. So no, I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And I think the rumours of people, like, there's now rumours saying that Alex was taking it in to get data for his tyres at the pit stop and stuff. And I just don't think it makes sense. Like, why would a team jeopardise 2 good point hauls to get one slightly better? And like, Max at the minute can only get so good. Max, like, it doesn't make sense. It's no.
That's a fair point. Will, any thoughts?
I think it's a tough one with Max Verstappen in particular. Let's see how long I can get into this before I cut out again, but we'll do our best. But no, I think Max is one of those drivers who is very, very quick and can do things with the car that a lot of drivers can't. Has a very, very unique driving style. I think Senna had something very, very similar. And what that means is if you design a car completely around Max, it makes it very hard for other drivers to use that car. Look at Gasly and look at Albon. That's 2 perfect examples of it. And I think it's what Ricciardo saw happening maybe towards the end of 2018 as well. I think it started to affect him as well in his performances. And he obviously jumped ship to Renault. So, really, I think with Max, it's a particular case. Charles, I think Sainz can jump in that car and be close to Charles because I don't think Charles has that same.
Can't wait for that. Just by the way,
yeah.
But anyway.
That's going to be brilliant. It's going to be really interesting to see how they do fighting for 9th and 10th. But nevertheless, that's my take on it. I think it's because it's happening with Max and Red Bull that it's become such a big thing because Max's driving style is just so different. We made it through. There was no.
Oh my god, that's amazing.
That's just gone, hasn't it? I can't believe that happened. That's you know. That was going to happen, wasn't it? I knew it was going to happen, but I got my point across. That's the main thing. Oh god.
Oh, that was so funny. All right, let's move on to the mid pack or the midfield. Now, there was one driver that joined Alex on the struggle bus. This race, and Lance Stroll had a shocker. Like, he had a shocker of a weekend. Firstly, he was miles off Perez during qualifying, and then we all saw what happened during the race. He had his accident with Lando. He got penalties for track limits. It was a rough one for Lance. Very heavily contrasted with Perez, who got punted off by Max early on in the race, still managed to charge up all the way through the field and finish. What did he end up finishing? P6? P7? P6, I think. I think he finished P6, which is a really, really great performance. So what did you make of of Racing Point's weekend?
I don't know. I'm quite borderline about Lance's overtake, because see if he'd pulled that off, would have been the best overtake of the year. And I thought it was very borderline of if that was a penalty or not. And I don't know if I'm being quite controversial here. I don't know. I think, track limits definitely. Should have got one for that because he was off all over the place. I think he was just driving really, really harshly and like really to the limit. And so was Checo. And I don't know if it was something to do with the car this weekend or if they'd been told kind of get on with it, get your elbows out. But both those racing points were being very risky with some of their moves. That one with Checo and Gasly as well was...
That was a scary one.
But yeah, Lance was kind of the better of the two drivers, I thought, for the first half of the season. And now that Perez has been dropped, Perez has kind of just gone out and really been smashing Lance. So yeah, I don't know if you guys would agree.
I agree.
Yeah, no, same. I think Stroll had a bit of an off weekend. You know, he had that clash with Verstappen, which, although I feel was more Verstappen's fault, I think it was maybe that Stroll still was partly to blame there. And, you know, then again, you know, bear in mind, it wasn't the only issue he had this weekend. It wasn't just those clashes. He also got a penalty for track limits. I think he was just pushing it a little bit too much and made a few too many mistakes, as he retired in the end with that damage from the Lando incident. Yeah, just a bit of a poor one. Hopefully just a blip, and I'm hoping he'll just kind of bring it back next weekend. But yeah, Perez were quite aggressive. Not the first time we've seen him force a driver into the pit wall, as we saw him do it with Gasly again in Spa, didn't we?
So a couple of years back.
Exactly. You know, we've seen that aggressive driving from Perez before. A little bit, again, kind of borderline for me. I know they were investigating that incident. I don't think either driver got a penalty, though, for that. But still, a little bit of a dodgy one for me.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a momentum shift within the team. I think you'd have wanted to see Lance sort of maintain his good form from the beginning stages of the season. But unfortunately for Lance, Perez has been comfortably quicker over the last couple of races in my mind, unfortunately. So I guess maybe adding fuel to the fire, you know, the fire that's burning in that says that Perez shouldn't have been dropped for Vettel, because Perez is still such a quality driver, as Dornie pointed out earlier, her candidate to replace Albon at Red Bull. So yeah, Racing Point, interesting times ahead for them. The car still feels to me like that car is underperforming fundamentally. I still think that if they had a Charles or a Max in that car, it would have been on the podium a lot more than it's actually been. That's just my view, I guess. And it's gonna be interesting to see if they continue their form next year, if they can actually develop that car and make the changes that they need to make with the reduced downforce levels for next year. So yeah, going to wait and see with Red Bull. I want to quickly chat about McLaren and Renault. Let's talk about them together. Now, McLaren, obviously, Carlos was leading the race after the first couple of laps. Like, what was going on there? I couldn't believe it. Again, I think proving to me, at least, that Carlos is probably next to Kevin Magnussen for some reason this year, the fastest starter in F1. Like, he's always making up positions on the opening lap. Doesn't matter where or when or where he starts. So that to me is quite impressive. Another weekend where he's actually out-qualified Lando and has arguably been the faster McLaren driver, which again, similar to Racing Point, is interesting to me, because at the beginning of the season, everybody was saying, you know, look, Lando is now outperforming Carlos. The only reason Carlos beat Lando last year was because Lando was rookie and Carlos had a bit more experience. But now I don't really buy that anymore. I think Carlos is legitimately probably the faster guy at the moment, over one lap and in the race, which, you know, given how highly Lando is rated, bodes well for us when Carlos goes to Ferrari next year, because I think it's going to be really interesting to see those two come up against, go up against each other. Any thoughts on Carlos and Lando before we move on to Renault?
Yeah, I think McLaren missed out on an opportunity this weekend because their cars seem to really have the pace. And when they're fighting with Racing Point and Renault for third now in the championship, that's big. That is really, really big. So it's a tough one for them that, obviously Lando got taken out by that incident with Stroll. I think with McLaren, there's been a big shift in the luck over the course of Lando and Carlos' time together overall, really. Throughout 2019, we saw the luck very much go in Carlos's favour. Then at the start of 2020, that luck favoured Norris, and we had several unfortunate incidents with Carlos. Now we go the other way around. Norris had to retire due to a mechanical failure at the Eiffel Grand Prix. There have been other incidents like that over the course of the last few races, which I think has played a part in their form as well. But I do agree. I think Sainz is on a high at the moment and really showing his stuff, and it's exciting. It's going to be exciting next year as well at Ferrari.
Yeah, definitely. I would agree. At the time when they signed Carlos, I was a bit like, oh, why? I thought Danny Rick would have been the kind of preferable choice in terms of like driving, but Carlos has really, really kind of proved that he can go and he can fight in that seat, and that he's going to kind of bring it. And he's just, you see him each week, as Will says, like leveling up. And you, at the start of the year, if you were like, oh yeah, McLaren kind of leading a race, you would have been like, but this week I was like, oh no, like Carlos kind of looks good there. He doesn't look out of place.
I also think so. I mean, Prime number 19, one of our watchers, just quoted that Carlos is the next Bottas, and I disagree wholeheartedly. I think people want him to be the next Bottas at Ferrari, but as Elliot says, I think Carlos is going to cause some serious trouble. I think there's going to be big fireworks between him and Charles because, you know, and I'm just going to talk for 10 seconds and we can move on, but I think Charles is probably going to have the edge on one lap. I think just watching the two, I think Charles might be the faster qualifier, but Carlos is like Alonso in the sense of he will put a race together and just always, you know, be up there in a good position fighting. So it's going to be really fun to see. I'm really looking forward to it. So let's move on to Renault because I want to celebrate. I feel vindicated because Esteban Ocon had an acceptable race performance where he beat his teammates, did a good job with race management, did a good job with tire management, didn't have any sort of incidents. He had quite a lot of bad luck recently with reliability. I thought this was a good weekend for Ocon, but not a great one for Renault.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, yeah, I mean, Ocon this year has been Formula One's resident rubbish bin, frankly. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But no, he's not been great. But this weekend was better. I think, although part of that was as a result of Ricciardo not really getting in tune with the track as well as he normally does, I still think Ocon took a step up. There was only a tenth between them in qualifying. Ocon, he just missed out on Q3 as well. And yeah, by the end of the race, beat Ricciardo, made that long stint at the start of the race work, which I was really surprised did. And yeah, fair play to him. He did well today. He now just needs to try and take that momentum and keep it going throughout the rest of the season. Because there's again, he's also in the rumour mill with Gasly and be going to Alpine at some point in the near future.
Yeah,
he's got to step up, and I think now he is, and it's gonna be interesting to see if he can keep this going.
I still think there's a really quick driver in there. I've been maintaining this the whole year. I think when Ocon starts getting his ducks in a row, he's gonna be a really good match for Alonso next year. I think it's gonna be a really strong team. Quite
Problem
frankly,
is, Ocon's ducks have tried to cross the road and been run over at the moment. He can't get them in a row. That's the issue.
He's trying his best. Just give Ocon a chance. Just give him a chance. Let him show you what he can do. He's so friendly. Like even today, I was watching him in the press, and he's just he's really friendly. He just wants to do a good job. I don't understand why people don't like him. Like he's just there trying his best. He's the new little engine that could, I feel. Now that Nico Rosberg has retired, Esteban Ocon is the little engine that could.
As long as he gets out the way for Christian in 2022, I'm happy.
Yes, it's fine. Dornie will fight about it next year. I mean, I wouldn't be averse to seeing Christian in Christian Lundgaard in Formula One. To be honest, I think he's super talented. But anyways, we're getting distracted. Let's chat about. I want to talk about AlphaTauri and Pierre Gasly. I mean, we've already discussed the whole Red Bull driver situation earlier on in the episode, so we don't have to talk about that again. But what I did find interesting, was Christian Horner saying that yes, Gasly's doing a good job, but it's just because the AlphaTauri is an easy car to drive. Do you guys agree with that? I don't necessarily agree with that because I mean, look at Kvyat. Kvyat is freaking nowhere, or especially this weekend, he was way down compared to Pierre.
Will, you'll be better talking about this than me.
Okay, I was waiting for you to go on that one, Dornie. But yeah, Kvyat, I do rate Kvyat. I think I'm with Kvyat like Tina says with Ocon. We keep, I keep wanting him to do but then
he holds a special place in your heart.
He does. I don't even know why, but I just like Kvyat. He's just a good lad, and there was a point in the middle of the season around Silverstone where he did seem to be taking the fight to Gasly, and that just seems to have fallen away now. And it is a shame with all the speculation about his seat going towards Italy. It's probably Tsunoda. So I just don't know with Daniel at the moment. I think Gasly is absolutely on the form of his life, and P5 again today. That's going to help. Bear in mind that he's fighting Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship. Basically, P6. That's a lot of money for the team.
Imagine
and Gasly
Ferrari
also
being in the fight with AlphaTauri for the fastest Italian team.
The other really sad thing, Tias, I'm going to make you sad again here, I'm afraid, but Gasly's now, is it 1 point behind Albon in the standings?
2 points
behind
Albon.
2 points behind Albon in the standings.
Correct. I saw that it was like a knife right here through my left ventricle when I saw that. But I'm making peace. I'm preparing myself emotionally for the worst, so it's fine. It's good.
I think Ocon is the little engine that could. Kvyat is the little engine that won't.
That won't.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, there's not much more I can say about AlphaTauri than that. So let's talk about I want to talk about Williams. I think this is an interesting one to me from Williams. Oh, you know what? When I wanted to way back earlier on in the episode, I was thinking about a team where there was one driver performing well and another driver that wasn't. Now, I don't want to say Latifi isn't performing well because I think Latifi is performing to within his capabilities. I am yet to be convinced whether that capabilities are expansive or much to write home about. But Latifi is it's not like with him, you think that he's dropping the ball or he's fumbling his way through the season. Like he's doing a solid job. But then you have George Russell, who has out-qualified his teammates during every single race in his Formula One career, which to me is just the most ridiculous stat. Like, I just think that's crazy. And has again been able to pull that Williams into a Q2 qualifying position, beating both Alfa Romeos, both Haas's, and obviously his teammates. Bear in mind, his teammate qualified last, if I'm not mistaken, and George was P15. So what do you guys make of George Russell and his standing within the Williams team, and how well is he actually doing?
I did actually say a couple of weeks ago that I didn't think he was fighting as much as he could, and he was just maybe falling back on a bit like the Williams is a bad car, and if I don't quite push it as much as I could, then I can just blame it on the fact that the Williams is a bad car. But I think the last week or this weekend, he's definitely stepped up and he was like dragging that car and pushing it around that track. And I think he had a really, really good weekend. And where he was on merit. We didn't have any retirements to push him up the grid. He was up in P7. I know that wasn't relative with pits factored in, but he was driving that car. And when you looked at where Latifi was in comparison, he was at the back, and George was in P7. And
I mean, George finished P14.
Was he not ahead of Seb as well?
Ahead of Giovinazzi, Magnussen. Well, he qualified P14, ahead of Seb, but finished the race in P14 as well. Where in the past we've seen George basically move backwards on the Sunday, but he finished ahead of Giovinazzi, Magnussen, Grosjean, Latifi, and Kvyat, and then obviously Stroll retired. But I think that's a brilliant effort from George for the whole weekend. And Nicolas Latifi, he'll keep plugging away. And he is like, I see people commenting here that, he's had some good race performances. Latifi has had some good race performances. I think he's a decent race car driver. One lap pace is, I think, a concern given how far ahead Russell is. Similar to how it's a concern for Albon, similar to how it's a concern for Seb, it's a concern for Latifi as well. So he's going to have to work. He's going to have to work on that and somehow figure out a way to get closer to George on Saturday, especially if Williams are going to start fighting sort of among that midfield more often now. Because then, as we see with Alex, 2 or 3 tenths can be the difference between starting P4, starting P8. And yeah, I think that's going to be the big thing. Now let's talk about the remaining 2 teams. With Haas, I don't want to spend too much time. The only interesting thing that happened with Haas this weekend was the fact that they fired both drivers. Even more interestingly, the fact that the drivers were surprised that they were going to get fired. And then lastly, the fact that I don't think we saw Kevin Magnussen once during this race. I literally did not see Kevin Magnussen's name even be mentioned. With the only place where I saw Grosjean was when he got the 5-second penalty for track limits. That's literally the only thing I saw about Haas.
When people mention Haas to me, I think, or especially Haas's performance this weekend, you know that Top Gear meme, the "oh no." Anyway,
yes.
that's what pops in my head. That is genuinely what comes into my head when you mention Haas's performance this weekend. They were just there. They were just filling up 2 slots on the grid. You know, there was one point where I thought Grosjean was going to absolutely pile into the back of one of the Alfa Romeos with the brake failure, which, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised going from a Haas, let's be honest. I thought, can't give us a safety car. Come on, Roman.
Please.
But no, you know.
Roman didn't even drive for change. You know, when he's so depressed that he's been dropped, that he stopped driving for change. He's no longer doing his most to give us entertaining races. And that, I think, is probably the most devastating thing of all.
It's heartbreaking.
100%. Okay, let's move on to Alfa Romeo, given that we've now been keeping these poor people busy for almost 3/4 of an hour, and we still have the Tf1 Show Awards to talk about. Let's talk about Alfa Romeo and Kimi Räikkönen, who had a really good weekend. Like, Kimi was also one of those drivers, similar to Perez and Sainz, where it was sort of a bit of a struggle initially. Giovinazzi was doing a bit more in the car compared to Kimi. But Kimi has picked up his socks. He's, put on his big boy pants, and he has driven that Alfa Romeo really well. I mean, the opening lap, obviously, is the one that everybody's raving about on Twitter. I, being the cynic that I am, wasn't that impressed. I was like, okay, the Alfa Romeo fired up its tires well, and then Kimi made a lot of good passes. In Kimi's defense, I guess Giovinazzi was nowhere on that opening lap, so that's kudos for Kimi. But overall, Kimi Räikkönen is looking good for another year at Alfa Romeo, and I think it's justifiable.
To be fair, Giovinazzi is nowhere is basically what he should put in his Twitter bio at this point. Because, well, I mean, it is. He's just there. He's not setting the world alight. And there's talks now that he's going to keep a seat at Alfa. I don't see why Ferrari would do that. But Kimi, what I think also surprises everyone about this whole Kimi making up 11 places on the first lap stat is the fact that this is the guy that went like 20 odd races in a Ferrari of not making a position on the first lap. If you remember that from like 2017, 2018.
Ooh, yes, that was painful.
Exactly. I think the one time he did it, when he finally broke that, was when he won his last race in Kota. So I think everyone wanted to see it from Kimi, and for someone who also has been kind of taking.
It was such a good run for Will. He's been doing so well, and now
that time, but. Here we go again. Okay. I feel like a 2018 Renault engine. But no, what I was just saying there was, I think Kimi is someone who's been taking his time, pardon the pun, even though it's a dead meme at this point. He's been taking his time.
PTSD, Will.
And, it's... I think it's just good to see him doing well and to see him kind of firing on all cylinders again.
No, that's a good point. Actually, Prime number 19 just made a good, he said he's shocked that Alpha's keeping Antonio. He is so vanilla. And I think that's a very good way of describing Antonio Giovinazzi. He is no-name brand vanilla ice cream. It's that sort of generic brand. You buy it because you want something sweet with your pancake or with your fruit salad or with your chocolate pudding or whatever you have it with. And that's obviously Kimi in this analogy, just to be clear. Like, Kimi is the chocolate pudding, and then we have Antonio Giovinazzi, who is the no-name brand vanilla ice cream. But then, Dornie, Will, you can have handcrafted British, I don't know, what's a good British ice cream? You guys need to tell me. I don't know anything. I don't know. Ben and Jerry's.
Ben and Jerry's is American.
Oh my gosh, that's embarrassing for you, Will.
Whoops.
Mackey's ice
You should
cream.
know this.
That's Scottish, I think. I don't know.
Mackey's ice cream, whatever. A British thoroughbred ice cream in Calamilot, but they've decided no, they're going to stay with their no-name brand Italian vanilla ice cream. I feel I've beaten this metaphor to death now.
Yeah.
So I think it's best to move on. But you get my point, right? You get what I'm trying to say about Giovinazzi. So I agree with prime number 19 that keeping Antonio is it's not the decision I would have made. But you know what? It's a Ferrari team. It's a Ferrari driver. So we can't expect sound, logical decisions from that organization. And I don't think we should. Okay, I've monologued so long now. I think Will and Dornie are just they're shell shocked. So let's move on from the teams. I think we've covered all of the teams. Correct me if I'm wrong, if we missed one, but I don't think we have. Let's move on to the Tf1 Awards. Now, both of you have been part of the nomination, committee nominating these drivers for the most illustrious of awards that we hand out, and I'm really excited to actually have two guests on to really make sure that we brainstorm this properly and make sure that justice is served and that the right driver actually gets the right award. So let's move into the first award, which is the Pastor Maldonado Award for Most Dunderheaded Deed. Who do we think should get that award this week?
I mean, I'd like to give it to my Wi-Fi, given how it's gone this podcast. But no, if we take it back to the Grand Prix, Lance Stroll, I think for me, just a bit of an off weekend in general. Had a few silly incidents, got 2 sets of penalties. It's a fairly easy one.
Dornie, your thoughts?
Yeah, probably concede that one.
Okay, fair enough. I want to flip it around and say I'm going to give it to Max Verstappen, even though he wasn't judged to be predominantly at fault. But I'm going to give it to Max for shoving his nose up in the inside of Stroll in turn 1 in FP2.
Okay. I thought you
why? No. Luckily not. But why take that risk? If you are a driver, and let's treat Max Verstappen as a championship-winning driver or a driver that wants to be fighting for championships in the future. Why would you do that? What do you get to gain in trying to go up the inside next to a car with his DRS flap wide open? Obviously looks like he's going on a fast lap. I don't understand why Verstappen did that, and I think he got lucky because he didn't really end up damaging his car. And I guess also it's FP2, so it wouldn't have been fine for the next weekend. But my nomination for that is Max Verstappen, just because I think it was dumb. And he's better than that, and you should know better than that. All right, next award, the Lewis Hamilton #Blessed Award for luckiest driver. Who do we think?
Blessed.
I don't know, really. I guess you could say maybe Sainz, luckiest start. I really don't know. Oh,
I know.
You could say Ocon as well for getting that overcut to work. It wasn't really the strategy that we expected to work going into the weekend, especially what we saw in practice. So maybe Ocon.
It's a good shout.
Yeah.
Dornie, any thoughts?
The other one you're looking at, Perez, for driving into Max and ruining his own race, but actually somehow making it work. That's
a good one. And again, I'm gonna flip Dornie's suggestion and say the luckiest driver is Max Verstappen, because he somehow managed to get no damage with his accident that he had with Perez.
It wasn't Max's fault.
I don't think it was.
Perez drove into him.
Yeah, I don't think one driver was predominantly to blame, but I do think Max got unbelievably lucky that he didn't have a puncture, he didn't have some sort of suspension problem, like no damage to that car. So that's why I think Max was the luckiest driver, because otherwise we would have had to talk about another race where Alex Albon outperformed his teammates, and that would have been, let's say, that would have given a very different flavor to this podcast if that had to be the case. Okay, last one is the Nico Hulkenberg Podium Award for unluckiest driver.
This is a tough one.
I know, again.
Lando Norris? Maybe? Obviously with the incident with Stroll, basically took him out of the race. I would have no one, but he did bring it back, so I'm going to go with Lando on this one.
I think I agree with you, Will.
I would say Bottas, but he's creating his own luck at this point. Like,
yeah, there wasn't anything unlucky really about Bottas.
It was just
that was just incompetence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
Lando
it is. Okay, there we have it, folks. Our 3 winners are. Who won the other one? Who won the first award again? Gosh, I'm useless. Anyway,
Verstappen and
yes,
Stroll.
it was Verstappen and Stroll, and we had Perez and Verstappen, and then Lando Norris at the end. So those are our award winners. Congratulations, Formula One drivers again. Can't wait for this award to be in prime position on your mantelpiece in your Monaco apartment. It's going to be great. And I guess we can also then say that is the end of the TF1 show for this week. Now, luckily, guys, we have another race coming up next week at Imola. It's going to be fascinating to see. We are not going to have Friday practice, which obviously is sad from my perspective because I just like watching Formula One cars. I don't mind whether it's for practice or not. But no practice next week. How do you guys see that panning out?
I tell you what, I'm going to say advantage Bottas because we've seen Hamilton takes his time to dial into a circuit. And the last time we had no practice sessions, 2 weeks ago in Eiffel, we saw, Bottas take the early momentum he has in the weekend and at least set into a pole position. So if he can do that and then not completely screw up the race, then, we could see a Bottas win. You never know. Good point. Dornie, anything you're looking forward to?
I think the Alpha Tauris are going to be good at Imola. I think Daniel as well is going to have a bit of pace.
Okay,
they've got testing time there. They have had testing time.
Yeah.
Oh, good point. Okay, well, we're going to come back to this comment at the end of next week's episode, I think, and see whether Dornie was correct. So that's a really interesting one. All right, everybody, that is the end of the TF1 show. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much to Will and to Dornie for joining. It's been a great fun. It's been a great chat. I think we had a really good conversation. Will went through an emotional roller coaster, a bigger roller coaster than the Algarve circuit with his Wi-Fi over the course of the past hour. But it's been really, really entertaining. Thank you so much, guys, for being on. As I said, I will link your channels in the description. So everybody, if you haven't subscribed yet, I would be very surprised if you haven't, because the channels are so great. Please go and do that. And then I guess I can also ask the same from you guys. For my channel, please leave a little like. Please pop a little comment if you disagree with a lot of my hot takes that I had over the past of this, over the whole episode. And then, if you like my face and if you like my voice, please drop a little subscribe, because that would be really very much appreciated. So yeah, that's everything from me. Can't wait to chat to all of you in a week's time. Bye, everybody.